Okay, starting with the sodium potassium pump. So the pump is going to allow us to create a gradient since we are moving ions from a low concentration to a high concentration using the pump. In order for us to do that though, we will need ATP because we're moving against the gradient. So for one ATP molecule, we're going to be able to pump 3 sodium ions out of the cell and bring in 2 potassium ions into the cell. This is a form of active transport because we are using ATP. And then moving on to facilitated diffusion. So in facilitated diffusion, we're going to have a higher concentration of sodium ions, for example, in a low concentration of sodium ions. So in order for us to be able to move those sodium ions in, we're going to have to use a protein carrier. The reason why we couldn't move those sodium ions through simple diffusion is because the sodium ions are polar in charge, and although they are compatible with the phospholipid heads, they are not compatible with the phospholipid tails because those phospholipid tails are nonpolar. So they will kind of repel each other and the phospholipid tails will just kick out those sodium ions. So we will need the protein carrier to help us get those sodium ions across. So since we are moving with the gradient, we will not need any ATP. So this is still considered a form of passive transport. So moving on to osmosis. So osmosis is defined as the movement of a solvent, which would be water, across the membrane from a high to low concentration of solute. And the solute is just anything we dissolve in water. It could be salt, sugar, a dye. So in this example, we have a red blood cell in a pure water concentration. So what's going to happen, there's going to be a higher concentration of this solute, so the salt or the sodium inside the cell, and there's going to be a low concentration of that solute on the outside because pure water doesn't have any sodium. So the water is going to move into the red blood cell to try to dilute the high concentration of sodium ions, but when it does that, it kind of causes the cell to swell up, which it can cause the cell to burst. So this would be an example of a hypotonic solution. And osmosis is still considered to be a form of passive transport because we're not using any energy, we're just moving with the gradient.